Allah's yad is not a hand. This word, try not to stretch that. Don't say yad, yad, yad. There's no extension there. Yad, dal. In Arabic, that's two letters. Yad. To briefly clear Allah from the organs known as hands, check the definitions listed for yad. Like what Al-Fayyumi said in Al-Misbah. Al-yadu mu'annathatun. Yad is feminine. You say here. وهي من المنكب إلى أطراف الأصابع. It's from the shoulder to the fingertips. واليد نعمة. And yad can mean endowment. والإحسان, and a favor. Favor means something you do for someone. تسمية بذلك لأنها تتناول الأمر غالبا. Naming those things like that because the hand is what performs that usually. The favor or the endowment would be called a yad because the hand is what usually performs that. وتطلق اليد على القدرة, and yad is used to mean power. ويده عليه أي سلطانه, and one's yad being over another or something is his authority. His yad over someone or his yad over something is his authority. وَالْأَمْرُ بِيَدِ فُلَانٍ, and the matter is in fulan's yad, أي في تصرفه, meaning it's under his discretion. He can do with it what he wants. وقوله تعالى حتى يعطوا الجزية عن يد, and God's saying, which is the 29th ayah of Surah Tawbah, it means until they give the jizya from a yad, أي عن قدرة عليهم وغلب, meaning having power over them and dominance. يعني, yes, it means until they pay the jizya defeated. وَأَعْطَاهُ وَأَعْطَى بِيَدِهِ, and you would say he gave by his yad. إِذَا انْقَادَ وَاسْتَسْلَمَ, meaning he submitted and yielded. أَعْطَى بِيَدِهِ. وَقِيلَ مَعْنَى الْآيَةِ مِنْ هَذَا, it was said this is what the ayah means. Until they give the jizya, until they pay the jizya in submission, in concession. It was said that this is the meaning of the ayah. وَالدَّارُ فِي يَدِ فُلَانٍ, the house is in fulan's yad, أي في ملكي, his ownership. His yad, his ownership. وَالْقَوْمُ يَدٌ عَلَى غَيْرِهِمْ, those people are a yad against others. أي مجتمعون متفقون, they are a yad, يعني they are a mobilized alliance. وَبِرْتُهُ يَدًا بِيَدٍ أي حاضرا بحاضر, and you say I sold it to him yad by yad, meaning in person. يعني we exchanged on the spot. All that's from Al-Misbah. The dictionary Al-Qamus adds Al-Yadul Kaf. The yad is the kaf, from the wrist to the fingers. أو من أطراف الأصابع إلى الكتف, or from the fingertips to the shoulder. So sometimes you say yad in Arabic, it means what we call hand, and sometimes you say yad and it means arm, including the hand. Sometimes we would say in English arm does not mean the hand though. وَالْيَدُ الْجَاهِ, and the yad is status. وَالْوَقَار, and serenity, like calmness. وَالْحَجْرُ وَالْحَجْرُ عَلَى مَنْ يَسْتَحِقُّهُ, and yad is barring against someone who's entitled, meaning depriving someone. Yad can be used to mean basically a barrier, a block, a deprivation, depriving someone who deserves to get to what is his. وَمَنْعُ الظُّلْمِ, and preventing injustice. Preventing injustice is yad. وَالطَّرِيقِ, and the pathway. وَبِلَادُ الْيَمَنِ, and the lands of Yemen. وَالْقُوَّةِ وَالْقُدْرَةِ, and strength and power, والسلطان and authority, والملك and ownership, كسر الميم, والجماعة and a group, والأكل and food, والندم and regret, والغياث and assistance, والاستسلام and submission, والذل and debasement, والنعمة and endowment, والإحسان تصطنعه and a favor that you exert. And he has more. All of these meanings for yed. Skipping more references only for the sake of brevity, and we can go on and on here. Among the meanings of yed is covenant, obedience, protection, the handle of a sword, the bird's wing, a duration of time, beginning, cash, ability, dispersion, that means breaking apart, and more. Some of these befit Allah, like power, and some do not, like hand as an organ. And as can be seen, the yad is not an exact counterpart for the word hand. Yad in Arabic is not a direct, exact counterpart for the word hand in English. We have seen in the two mentioned dictionaries that yad can mean arm, like in Surah Al-Ma'idah, فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. Wash your faces and yad until the elbow. So, O Wahhabi, is it a hand or an arm? Or is it an arm with a hand? Or a hand without an arm? Or an arm without a hand? Because yad has so many meanings, what is intended may not even appear if you translate it literally. Because yad has so many meanings, what is intended may not appear if translated literally. Yani, sometimes the word yad is there. You just can't translate it as hand. Let's say, for example, there was an expression in Arabic that says, fi yadillah, and then someone translated it as, in the hand of God. And then, let's say, in Arabic language and in English language, both of them, the context shows that what's meant is power. Okay, so it means power. If one had translated yad as hand here, the meaning of power could still be there. But sometimes the word yad would be there. You just can't translate it as hand. It won't work. The real meaning won't show up, as we will see. Imam Abu Hanifa, the most explicit of the four Imams in clearing Allah from likeness, yani, Abu Hanifa was most elaborative of the four Imams in these matters of Aqidah, because he has numerous works in Aqidah. Shafi'i does too, but Abu Hanifa was most extensive and very explicit, talking like we talk. And Shafi'i did too, and Malik also did. They talk like we talk, but Abu Hanifa had the words more. He said, وَلَهُ يَدٌ وَوَجْهٌ وَنَفْسٌ. He has attributes called yad and wajh and nafs. Nafs means self. كما ذكره الله تعالى في القرآن, just as he, the exalted, mentioned in the Quran. فما ذكره الله تعالى في القرآن من ذكر الوجه واليد والنفس فهو له صفات بلا كيف. So whatever Allah, exalted is He, mentioned in the Quran of al-wajh, al-yad, and an-nafs, those are attributes of His without a how. Right there, when He said, wal-yad, sifatun lahu bila kayf. Right, we could paraphrase right here, that Abu Hanifa is saying, yad is sifatun lahu bila kayf. It's an attribute of His without a how. So then what comes after that, which is the part the Wahhabi takes in particular, this explains that. So what did he say after that? وَلَا يُقَالُ إِنَّ يَدَهُ قُدْرَتُهُ أَوْ نِعْمَتُهُ. It is not said that his yad is his power, nor his endowment. لِأَنَّ فِيهِ إِبْطَالَ الصِّفَةِ. Because in saying that, there is nullification of the attribute. وَهُوَ قَوْلُ أَهْلِ الْقَدَرِ وَالْإِعْتِزَالِ. And that is the saying of the deniers of destiny and the Mu'tazila. ولكن يده صفته بلا كيف. Rather, his yad is an attribute without a how. He did not say by the apparent meaning. He didn't say that. So what's the Wahhabi going to say? The Wahhabis say that he said about the yad, and it is not said that his hand is his power nor his endowment, because in saying that there is nullification of the attribute. So you're probably familiar with that move there. This saying that they take from Abu Hanifa, which is here, ولا يقال إن يده قدرته أو نعمته لأن فيه إبطال الصفة. It wouldn't be said that his yad, but they're going to say hand. They say that Abu Hanifa said that his hand is his power or his favor or endowment, because that invalidates the attribute. But right before that, Abu Hanifa said bila kayf, without a how. That means it's not an organ, and it's not literal. Not even literal. When he said bila kayf, it means not even literal, not the apparent meaning. And he said it afterwards too. Bila kayf, walakin yaduhu sifatuhu bila kayf. So Abu Hanifa's words explain themselves. But a Wahhabi doesn't know what bila kayf means. He thinks bila kayf means we don't know how. To him, Abu Hanifa is saying he has a hand and a face and a self. You might even say soul. Like he said about himself in the Quran. So whatever Allah said in the Quran of mentioning the face and the hand and the self, those are attributes of his. We don't know how. That's what it means for a Wahhabi. And it's not said that his hand is his power or his endowment, because that has invalidation of the attribute. And that's what the people of Qadr and I'tizal said. Rather, his hand is his attribute and we don't know how. That's what this statement of Abu Hanifa means to a Wahhabi. They mean that he is saying that it is an actual and literal hand, and that any alternative wording must be abandoned. However, he truly means that this attribute is not always interpreted as power in every context, nor always interpreted as endowment in every context, etc. That's what he means when he says it's not said that his yad is his power, and it's not said that his yad is his ni'mah. He means ala al-itlaq. It's not an absolute. That's not an absolute. It is not simply a synonym for a single meaning like power. But he certainly is not saying that it is to be taken literally, because he said without a how. He also is not saying that it always has the same explanation wherever it is found. That's what Abu Hanifa is saying. You need to, if you're going to explain it, know the meaning of what you're discussing. For instance, in one verse, Allah said, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. The yad of Allah is over their hands. It truly means that their allegiance to the Prophet is a commitment to Allah. Their allegiance to the Prophet is a commitment to Allah. Not that Allah put his hand on top of the Muslim's hands, which is physical contact, which they believe, those Wahhabis believe that that's valid, that God would touch you himself, or that you could touch him. So if we say hand, the hand of Allah is over their hands, it's not clear. The intended meaning in the translation is not clear. If there's context, then maybe. When I say maybe here, what I mean is the Quran has very high literary style. So it's not impossible that someone could see, let's say if that said hand, but there's proper context shows the meaning. It's not impossible that someone could, from to set the hand of Allah is over their hands, that he could understand what that's supposed to be meaning, especially if he has strength in literature. If there's proper context, he has strength in literature, he might see that. But we're not going to say like that or talk like that. The meaning is their allegiance to the Prophet is a commitment to Allah. Not that he put his hand on top of the Muslim's hand. And Nasafi said, and this is Nasafi, the interpreter of the Quran. There's two Nasafis. And Nasafi said, Wallahu munazzahun anil jawarih wa an sifati al-ajsam. Allah is exalted from the limbs and from the attributes of the body. وإنما المعنى تقرير أن عقد الميثاق مع الرسول كعقده مع الله. That the contract of the covenant with the messenger كعقده مع Allah is like such a contract with Allah. Like that, yes. That's if he's saying this is the meaning. When they made a covenant with the messenger, it was like making a covenant with God. That doesn't mean the messenger's like God. It means on his authority. On his authority. من غير تفاوت بينهما, without difference between the two. كقوله من يطيع الرسول فقد أطاع الله. Like the ayah, that means whoever obeyed the messenger has indeed obeyed Allah. Whoever obeyed the messenger has obeyed Allah. That clarifies that who makes a covenant with the messenger, it's like he made a covenant with God, because that's the messenger of God on the authority of the messenger. That's the meaning of Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. And notice the amount of explanation it takes to clarify these things. But notice how easy it is just to mess it up. All a person has to do is take this piece of the ayah and take this word yet and translate it as hand and put it in the hands of an ignorant person and teach him wrong. And then he's going to think Allah has a hand. And then in his ignorance he's going to argue with us, and we're going to have to say all of this, for example. This the difference between making the mess and cleaning it up. Al-Tabari said, وَفِي قَوْلِهِ يَدُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَجْهَانِ مِنَ التَّأْوِيلِ. There are two ways of interpretation for this ayah. أَحَدُهُمَا يَدُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ عِنْدَ الْبَيْعَةِ. One is that the yad of Allah is over their hands at the time of paying allegiance. لأنهم كانوا يبايعون الله ببيعتهم نبيه صلى الله عليه وسلم. Because they are paying allegiance to Allah by their allegiance to His Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. So that's just what Nasafi said. Same tafsir as Nasafi. وَالْآخَرُ قُوَّةُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ قُوَّتِهِمْ. The other way to be able to explain the ayah is to say the power of Allah is over their power in supporting His messenger. قوة الله فوق قوتهم في نصرة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The power of Allah is over their power in supporting His messenger. لأنهم إنما بايعوا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على نصرته على العدو. Because they only paid allegiance to the messenger of Allah to support him over the enemy. Meaning, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. The yad of Allah is over their hands. That's literal translation. Tabari is basically saying another way of the tafsir that it means Qudratullahi fawqa qudratihim. Quwwatullahi fawqa quwwatihim. God's power is over their power. What power is their power? Their power to support the messenger. Why would that be the meaning of the ayah? Why would it be their power to support the messenger? Why would that be the meaning of the ayah? Because this ayah is about when they paid allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, taking into account the reason for the revelation of the ayah. Sometimes the reason for the revelation of the ayah is needed for understanding the meaning, the tafsir of the ayah. Here's an example for you. So look at that. Wahhabi will bring you an ayah that you might need to explain to him the reason for the revelation just to get him to understand. Because all he is a mess maker. You have to clean it up. There is also a hadith, Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah. The yad of Allah is with the jama'ah. Here, literally, in a literal sense, yani, his hand is with them. While there, in the ayah we just finished, it was, in a literal sense, over them. Yadullahi ma'a, Yadullahi fawqa. By this we know that it should not be taken literally, right there. Once the prepositional word changed there, in one ayah, The prepositional word with yadullah is fawqa. And in this hadith, the prepositional word with yadullah is ma'a. By this we know that it should not be taken literally. And if Allah willed, we will address the usage of various prepositions used for Allah. We'll come to it inshallah. The explanation here is that the support of Allah is with the jama'ah, and it is said to mean His protection and heed is with the jama'ah. From these, it is clear that the literal meaning of yad is not intended. And whoever thought well of Abu Hanifa did not explain his quote like the Wahhabis. But don't forget, there's a lot of Sunni Muslims who they don't believe like Wahhabis, but they translate like Wahhabis. And sometimes those Sunni Muslims, they don't want to change that. We don't translate like that, and we don't encourage that. Also, whoever knows the truth knows that despite that the Wahhabis misquote Abu Hanifa from time to time, they truly hate him and believe him to be a giant deviant.
Question: does the Quran say that Allah has two hands? No. Firstly, know that the singular form of the Arabic word is yad. Its dual, the dual form, is yadan or yadain. That just depends on what it's doing in the sentence. If it's a subject or object. Yadan if it's a subject. Yadain if it's an object. So dual form means, in the most literal sense, two yads. And the plural is aid, aidin. Aid or ad, al-ad. So that's going to be three or more yeds. Then know that all of these forms have come in the religious texts. Yani, there's hadith and ayat of the Quran that have the singular form of yad and the dual form yadan or yadain and the plural form aid. And that fact in itself, the fact that all these forms, singular, dual, and plural, have come, that proves that the literal meaning cannot be taken. Because if you want to take any one of those forms literally, then you can't take the other form. One hadith or verse with the singular form would apparently say that he has one hand, like the texts that have been presented already. Another with the dual would say two in a literal sense, as will be presented. And another having the plural form would apparently say three or more. That's a total of six, at least. Why then did they not say that he has six or more hands by combining all the evidence? Is it that they believe like the Hindus or think him to be like an insect? Question: is the usage of the dual form not strong evidence for two hands? It is not. The fact is that the dual form does not always denote a pair. Sometimes it promotes importance or swiftness to act, or the reoccurrence of something more than twice. So for a Wahhabi saying, why you want to make all these excuses? Why don't you just say two hands? And the answer is because Allah does not resemble the creations. So the Wahhabi does not know what it means to say that Allah is unlike the creation. One example is what the dictionary Mukhtar al-Sahah or Mukhtar al-Sihah offers, you can say it either way, offers about the famous Talbiyah. Talbiyah, that's the dhikr of Hajj. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Labbaik la sharika laka labbaik. What did the dictionary say about this famous dhikr? Qawluhum labbaik. They're saying labbaika ay ana muqimun ala ta'atik. It means I am steadfast on your obedience, or to your obedience. وثني على معنى التأكيد. It was dualized on the meaning of emphasis, yani for the meaning of emphasis, or the point of the dualization in the statement is to intensify it. Because if it's a true literal dual here, it means I obey you twice. But two is not intended here. So that's dual form, not for really two things. Another is the fourth verse in the chapter of Al-Mulk. ثُمَّ رُجِعِ الْبَصَرَ كَرَّتَيْنِ. As if the verse says, look twice. ارجع البصر كرتين. It is more accurately explained, not literally translated, explained like how At-Tabari said, كرتين مرة بعد أخرى. He said karratain means time and again, over and over, not twice only. Look twice doesn't mean look two times and then stop. It means look again and again. So, like those dual expressions do not refer to two, the dual form in the chapter of Sa'd, verse 75, does not refer to two. يا إبليس ما منعك أن تسجد لما خلقت بيدي. Oh, Iblis, what prevented you from prostrating to what I created? Biyadai. It means, seemingly looks like it means with my two hands. What prevented you from prostrating to what I created with my two hands? So for Wahhabi, that's very clear. That's why we fourthly talked about Yed. So we firstly talked about Hadith of Slave Girl. We secondly talked about the ayah of istiwa. We thirdly talked about the hadith of descent with a digression to talk about coming and approaching. And now we are fourthly talking about the attribute of yad, because this is going to be one of their immediate go-tos. The issue of yad, and this ayah in particular, because of the dual form there. Those people, being the body worshippers they are, they want to really give you this ayah and say it means whom I created with my two hands. And then they will argue with you that nothing else would make any sense here. It has to be my two hands. So what did Allah say in the Quran? يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Allah misguides by the Quran many, and He guides by the Quran many. That means there will be many people who read in the Quran and they go astray. Not only be guided, they would read the book of Allah and go astray. Remember the comparison the Shaykh gave us for the mutashabi verses of the Quran, the ambiguous verses. He said these verses are like the imposter, Ad-Dajjal, the imposter, that one who will come out and then Jesus will come down and kill him. What's his case? His case is that he comes out and he claims to be God, and then he does supernatural things. And then some people will be misguided by his supernatural feats. Some people will be misguided by his supernatural feats and worship him despite that he's created. Allah created him and what he does. And Allah made him a test for his slaves. Like that, Allah put verses in the Quran that distinguish between those who truly clear Allah from the creations and those who they worship their imaginations. Those who have anthropomorphic and paganistic inclinations, like they have inclination to believe like Christians. These verses of the Quran expose those type of people. And then those type of people would think that we, the ones who don't take these literally, are extremists and atheists, etc. So here, this ayah, يا إبليس ما منعك أن تسجد لما خلقت بيدي. Oh Iblis, what prevented you from prostrating to what I created? Biyadai, it apparently means with my two hands, but it must have another meaning for anyone who's a true monotheist. It must have another meaning unless you accept to liken Allah to his creations. Then for you it's fine to be literal. Some scholars said that it was mentioned that Adam was created with God's yadain, that we're not going to translate as two hands, to express Adam's special honor. Because to the contrary, though Satan was also created by Allah, it was not mentioned that he was created with his yadain or by his yadain. Ibn Hajar logged what some scholars explained. So this is from Fathul Bari. وقال غيره هذا يساق مساق التمثيل للتقريب. And others said, this verse was put forth to approximate an understanding. لأنه عهد أن من اعتنى بشيء واهتم به, because it is known that anyone who takes care of something and has interest in it, so we're talking about a concept here. If someone were interested in something and attends to it and he takes care of it, basharahu biyadayh, he attends to it with both hands. He handles what is very important, very precious, etc., with both hands, even if it's not heavy. His handling something with both of his hands draws importance to the thing that he's handling with both hands. فيستفاد من ذلك أن العناية بخلق آدم كانت أتم من العناية بخلق غيره. It is thus promoted from that. Yani, this word usage informs that the heed given to the creation of Adam was more excellent than that of other creations. So here's not a matter of just translating it literally. So for Wahhabi, the ayah basically means that Allah is a figure who has a right side and a left side. He has two hands that have digits, and he, with those two, that right and that left, he engages created things, he touches them, and etc. That's the Wahhabi Judeo-Christian belief. Wahhabi Judeo-Christian belief. We are not allowed to say it means two hands, for that would be explicitly comparing Allah to the humans. And as mentioned, some scholars said that every mutashabih verse, every ambiguous verse, has something in its vicinity that clarifies its meaning. See the same surah, Surah Sad, Ayah 45. Where's the ayah we were discussing? 75. So before that, in the same surah, Allah says, واذكر عبادنا إبراهيم وإسحاق ويعقوب أولي الأيدي والأبصار. It apparently says, yani in a literal sense, remember our slaves, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, possessors of hands and visions. That's if you take a word-for-word translation. So how do the Wahhabis translate that? In the Wahhabi mistranslation, they make a ta'wil and say, here's cut and paste from Wahhabi document, so-called Noble Quran. They put it online, so I was able to just cut and paste from their own source. This is how they translated it. And remember our slaves, Ibrahim, Ishaq, and Yaqub, all owners of strength in worshiping us, and also of religious understanding. So where's the hands? How did the word hands not make it into their translation? Thus, they make ta'wil for creations that really have hands, because they really have hands, so why not just go ahead and put it in there? They had hands, because even if you put that they had hands, if you said it like that, and despite that that's true, it still wouldn't even make sense, because then someone would say, why does it say they have hands? Well, of course they have hands. What's the point of saying they have hands? So then it doesn't mean hands. It means something else. But they do really have literal hands, so the Wahhabis make ta'wil for creations that really have true literal hands. But for Allah, supremely exalted beyond the descriptions of men, they insist on the literal meanings. For the slaves who have literal hands, they didn't find it appropriate to translate it as hands. And for the one who doesn't resemble anything, they refuse to do anything but translate it as hands. But all of this is still not enough to convince a stubborn Wahhabi that Allah does not have two hands. All what we said right now is like shooting Superman with bullets, cut you call. It's bouncing right off of him. He's standing there like, are you done? Because I have more proof for you. Because he will also produce a piece of the 64th verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah. بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْثُوطَتَانِ. They say it means, nay, both his hands are widely outstretched. Another Wahhabi Judeo-Christian belief, believing that God is some figure with a robe, for example, and so much light coming out of his head, you can't see any distinct face, and he has flip-flops, and his arms are outstretched, and maybe there's clouds and smoke around him. But like some scholars said, every mutashabih verse has something in its vicinity that clarifies its meaning. The context of the verse, by what is before the sentence in question and what is after it, so what's before this 64th ayah and what's after it, it shows that it truly means not he has two hands that are stretched out, it means he is exceedingly generous. Because the ayah goes, وقالت اليهود يد الله مغلولة غلت أيديهم ولعنوا بما قالوا بل يداه مبسوطتان ينفق كيف يشاء. The Jews said, Allah's hand is shackled. They meant he's stingy. Even when the Jews said that, they didn't mean it literally. When they said, Yadullahi maghlula, they meant God is stingy. They weren't saying he has organs. That wasn't the point of their sentence. So the Jews said, Allah's hand is shackled. May their hands be shackled. And they were damned for what they said against God. Rather, بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْثُوطَتَانِ. He is exceedingly generous. That's the meaning, not the literal translation. يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. He gives as he wills. This is its meaning, not its literal translation of having two outstretched hands. Do not be caught by the literal wording, for that is not intended. Imam An-Nasafi said it well. An-Nasafi, the interpreter. وَغُلُّ الْيَدِ وَبَثْتُهَا مَجَازٌ عَنِ الْبُخْلِ وَالْجُودِ. The shackling of the yad and its being outstretched are figures of speech for miserliness and generosity. The Jews said his hands are shackled, means not out. They are together, they're locked up, confined. That was a way to say he's a miser. So Allah rejected what they said. بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ. Rather, he has not just yad, because they said yad, singular form. بَلْ يَدَاهُ, dual form. مَبْسُوطَتَانِ is outstretched in a literal sense, means he's very generous. وَمِنْهُ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى. An example of that is the saying of God, exalted is he, وَلَا تَجْعَلْ يَدَكَ مَغْلُولَةً إِلَىٰ عُنُقِكَ وَلَا تَبْسُطْهَا كُلَّ الْبَسْطِ. The 29th verse of Surah Al-Isra. Do not put your hand chained to your neck, and do not extend it the complete extension. That means don't be a complete balled up miser, and don't be so generous that you ruin yourself. So the shackling of the hand means miserliness. This is addressed to the slaves. Don't put your hand chained to your neck. Does it mean any one of us is going to really put his hand chained to his neck? No, you're not going to. No one's going to say, oh, look what the ayah told me. Let me go get my shackle and throw it in the dumpster so that I don't shackle my hand to my neck anymore. The ayah just forbade me from that. So it doesn't mean that. and don't extend it a complete extension. ولا يقصد المتكلم به إثبات يد ولا غل ولا بسط. And Nasafi said, the speaker of this expression, who says something like this, does not intend the confirmation of a hand, nor of a shackle, nor of an extension. حتى إنه يستعمل في ملك يعطي ويمنع بالإشارة من غير استعمال اليد. This expression could even be used for a king who gives and withholds by a mere signal, without using the hand. ولو أعطى الأقطع إلى المنكب عطاء جزلا لقالوا ما أبسط يده بالنوال. And had someone whose arm was amputated, he has a missing arm altogether from the shoulder. Had he given abundantly, they would have said, how outstretched is his yed in giving, because a real hand is not what's intended. وَقَدْ اسْتُعْمِلَ حَيْثُ لَا تَصِحُّ الْيَدِ. And it is used where it is not even valid for there to be a true hand. يُقَالُ بَسَطَ الْبَأْسُ كَفَّيْهِ إِلَى صَدْرِي. It is said, the calamity extended its two hands in my chest. That's a literal translation. فَجُعِلَ لِلْبَأْسِ الَّذِي هُوَ مِنَ الْمَعَانِي كَفَّانِ. Thus the calamity, which is abstract, not something physical and concrete. Calamity is an abstract thing. It was given two hands, if you wanted to translate the statement literally. ومن لم ينظر في علم البيان يتحير في تأويل أمثال هذه الآية. And whoever does not look into the knowledge of rhetoric becomes confused about the explanation of the likes of this verse. That's why the God comparers don't become linguists, because they don't understand the language. And had they understood the language, then they would not have fallen into such blunders. Not to mention that they're retarded. وَقَوْلُهُ غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ دُعَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ بِالْبُخْلِ. And his saying, this ayah, غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ, may their hands be shackled, is a supplication against them to be miserly. And that's how the Jews are. وَمِنْ ثَمَّ كَانُوا أَبْخَلَ خَلْقِ اللَّهِ. And from there they became the most miserly creation of Allah. أَوْ تُغَلُّ فِي جَهَنَّمْ. Or it means their hands will be shackled in hell. فَهِيَ كَأَنَّهَا غُلَّتْ. So it is as if they are already shackled. Their hands are shackled, meaning shall be shackled in hell. Like when Allah said, إِنَّكَ مَيِّتْ, you are dead, Muhammad, meaning you shall die. Or you say for the prayer in the Iqamah, قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ, the prayer has commenced, meaning it's about to start, and you didn't even start yet. فَهِيَ كَأَنَّهَا غُلَّتْ. وَإِنَّمَا ثُنِّيَتِ الْيَدُ فِي بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ. And the yet was only dualized in this part of the ayah, بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ. Literally, rather his yadan are outstretched. وَهِيَ مُفْرَدَةٌ في يد الله مغلولة. While it was singular in the Jews' insult to God when they said the hand of Allah is shackled, لِيَكُونَ رَدُّ قَوْلِهِمْ وَإِنْكَارُهُ أَبْلَغَ وَأَدَلَّ عَلَى إِثْبَاتِ غَايَةِ السَّخَاءِ لَهُ. So that the refutation of their claim and the objection to it would be more emphatic and more indicative of confirming the extensiveness of his generosity. وَنَفْيُ الْبُخْلِ عَنْهُ. And so that it would be more emphatic of the negation of miserliness from him. فَغَايَةُ مَا يَبْذُلُهُ السَّخِيُّ أَنْ يُعْطِيَهُ بِيَدَيْهِ. For the extent of what the generous one gives is what he gives with his two hands. Meaning, when someone generous gives the most that he could give, then he would give with both of his hands. Imagine a person that says, here, take this. He wants to give you something with both his hands. So that physical picture there, render it abstract. Take away the physical connotation there and take what's left, the abstract figure of speech. ينفق كيف يشاء. He gives as he wills. تأكيد للوصف بالسخاء ودلالة على أنه لا ينفق إلا على مقتضى الحكمة. This is an affirmation of the description of generosity and is proof that he only gives in accordance with divine wisdom. Therefore, when the Jews said that God's hand is shackled, they meant to insult him for miserliness because they found that the bounties and ease they were getting were diminished. They did not intend a true hand. Then Allah refuted their insult by using the dual form of yed to express his great generosity. Then he confirmed that he is indeed generous and gives as he wills. The verse is about generosity, not an organ. Look at all the explanation we had to go through because what? We have to clean up the mess. Those Wahhabis are the mess makers. That's the easy part, just to take it literally and then be a dummy and be lazy, and we have to come and clean it up. So it takes more effort. But still, this would not change the mind of an obstinate Wahhabi. He's still not convinced. He's still standing there taking bullets. Because there is the hadith, وَكِلْتَا يَدَيْهِ يَمِينٌ. They say it means both of his hands are right hands. Then they feel embarrassed when we respond, don't you know that having two right hands is a deformity? Two right hands? Sounds like a Hindu baby. The proper meaning is like what Ibn Battal said in his explanation of Al-Bukhari, like many others said, أراد نفي النقص عنه عز وجل لأن الشمال أنقص من اليمين. In this hadith, he intended the negation of imperfection from Allah Azza wa Jal, because the left is more deficient than the right. So what literally would translate as both of his hands are right hands is a way to say he's so perfect. Because the Wahhabis believe that these are noticeably clear evidence that Allah has two real hands, and what has been presented is surely not convincing for them. The arguments that have been presented here is still not convincing for them. We smack them with a clear refutation by citing the 71st verse of Surah Yasin. أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَنَّا خَلَقْنَا لَهُم مِّمَّا عَمِلَتْ أَيْدِينَا أَنْعَامًا. Did they not think that we created for them cattle? Apparently, though, meaning in a literal sense, that we created for them from what we have done with our hands, but that's plural form. Aidina, our hands, in plural form. Here, the plural form is used, not the singular nor the dual. Wait to produce this verse until after they claim that Allah has two hands. Yani, hold this one. This one is a secret weapon. Then be amused at which way they try to escape. Once they say, no, two hands, two hands. Then you bring them this ayah, and then you're going to see how they backtrack. One would wonder how they explain the dual form in the 57th verse of Surah Al-A'raf. بَيْنَ يَدَيْ رَحْمَتِهِ. It literally says, between the two hands of his mercy. بَيْنَ يَدَيْ رَحْمَتِهِ. Between the two hands of his mercy. What does that mean? Means his mercy has two hands. And also the Quran. The Quran verifies what is bayna yadayhi. So if you want to translate it literally, it would mean the Quran verifies what is between its own two hands. That means but the real meaning is the Quran verifies the revealed books that came before it. And finally, do not use the 47th verse of Surah Al-Dhariyat as your main reference. If you want, don't even bring it up. وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ. They're probably going to bring it up. If anything, let the Wahhabi bring it up. Don't bring this ayah. That's my suggestion to you. If you want to have a debate that doesn't have any way to make you backtrack something. وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ. And the sky, we built it with aid. The scholars differed about whether aid in this verse is the plural of yad, so that the literal meaning would be we created it with hands, but that means power. Or if it is its own word that simply means power, aid, ada ya'idu aida, qadara, to have power. Some Wahhabis know this difference. And if you start with this ayah, or even bring it anywhere in your debate, they will correctly refer to those who said that this is not the plural of yet, although it's not a consensus. But just the fact that they will be able to bring you true, authentic documentation of scholars, reliable scholars who said this is not aid, that's the plural of yet. This is different. This is from ada ya'idu, aidan, a qadara, qudratan, to have power. So what are you going to do? You're going to say, but others, they said, so no need to go there. So if you want, exclude this ayah from your argument. And if a Wahhabi brings it up because he wants to use it to make you commit to it, and then say, but the scholar said, or some, that it doesn't mean that. So if he brings it up, he says, oh, like this ayah, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ. Just say, I'm not referring to that ayah. You brought that ayah just so you could set me up to shut me down. I'm not even using this ayah. Maybe you might even find a Wahhabi who's waiting for you to bring this ayah. Then when you don't, and he finally can't be patient anymore, he will bring it and then bind you to it so that he can refute you. So it's okay. Say, I didn't produce this ayah, you produced this ayah. Maybe he'll say, but the other Ash'aris, they produce it. Say, I'm talking with you now. I'm not producing this ayah. It's not part of my argument. You want to argue something I didn't say? Go argue with someone else. So some Wahhabis know of this difference, and if you start with it, with this ayah, or use it anywhere in your argument, they will correctly refer to those who said that it is not the plural of yad, and that will make you appear ignorant and misinformed. And you'll have to backtrack something or qualify your statements. Wallahu a'lam. Allah knows best. We'll stop there.